the Celtics keep doing it. They keep stacking solid wins together. And yes, you're not really playing anybody in the Warriors. Steph out, obviously Jimmy Butler out for the season. A bunch of guards and Draymond Green out there on the court for the Warriors. But nonetheless, right now it's not about the other teams you're playing. When you play the teams like the Thunder, when you play those, tougher teams, even in the East, the Pistons, the New York, it's about both teams and about how you match up against the other team. But when you're playing these lower, sort of, whether it's a play-in team or a tanking team, it's not about how you look as a team against them. It's about how your players are manipulating the other team's defense, how your players are working through tough situations, even if, they're only every so often, right? We saw it against the Suns, right? The Suns are a good team. They're banged up for sure right now, and we'll see what happens as we inch closer to the playoffs with them, right? But we saw that the Celtics were able to work through things and execute in crunch time despite not being able to pull away in that game. And then in this game, right, it's a blowout from the beginning. It stays within 11 or so points for much of the game before the Celtics blow it open in that fourth quarter. But the story of the game is obviously, number one, Jaylen Brown continuing to put on MVP performances. We'll talk about his performance in just a second. But then it's Jayson Tatum, right? Whether it's Jaylen Brown or Jayson Tatum, how will these two guys continue to grow together as a duo, right? It's a different duo than we've seen in the past just because of where Jayson Tatum is right now in his recovery. And I want to start with Jayson Tatum because this was by far his best performance this season, right? It started a little cold with his shooting, but now that he's able to play these full quarters and the minute restriction allows him to do that, he's up to 30, 31, 32 minutes per game, which allows him to play a full quarter and then be available for the rest of the game. You see him get into a rhythm. And yes, he started cold in this game, but he caught on fire quickly in those second and third quarters. 24 points, highest of the season, I do believe, maybe tied. 5 of 11 from 3. That's pretty good 3-point shooting. 7 of 15 overall, up to 50% on field goals. 10 rebounds. The assists, were not as high as you would like, but definitely this was a game where the Celtics didn't need to have, a huge assist game. They only had 22 assists. It was very easy to get to the basket and create offense for yourself, right? Has a steal, has, a couple turnovers, but nevertheless, plus 18, able to play 31 minutes, and he just looked the most like himself out there. No more of those one-legged pull-up jumpers that we've seen from him. No more of that, hesitancy to get to the basket. He had, one hesitation in that second half, and then, from there on out, he was able to get Kristaps Porzingis on an ISO, drive, Euro, sort of, how he does that step through underneath. I think it was D'Anthony Melton at that time, and get to the rim. He's finishing through contact in this game, something he hasn't really been able to do since he's gone back, right? And he's not getting the calls at the moment just because he's still working his way back, but it was great to see him able to get to the basket and finish through contact, something that when he was at his prime, he could do no problem. And we've seen the ups and downs from him throughout this season since he's come back. And I just thought that, that's really where I want him, right? In the 24 to 25 points per game. You have the 10 rebounds, right? He did a great job of going up with 2 feet, landing with 2 feet, but not being afraid to jump into a contested, a rim area and grab a rebound. Those one-handed sort of rebounds where he reaches up and pulls it down. Those things that he, was just fantastic at in the playoffs last season and has been for his career, right? He's been a great rebounder, and you're just starting now to see him fully get back. And that's what's great about these couple of games that they've played against the Wizards, Suns, Warriors. I think they played the Grizzlies on Friday before they played they face a Wolves team that is very streaky, but definitely has a much higher upside than any of the teams that they played so far. And we'll get to that later in the show, right? But these low caliber opponents are just a great spot for Jayson Tatum to get his rhythm. Because to be honest, it's not actually about the defense that he's facing. It's all, solely on Jayson Tatum. This stretch, this, ability to recover, to get his rhythm back. It's all on Jayson Tatum's, or I guess his own making, right? Nobody is going to affect, when he's on the level that he needs to get to, which might not be this season, might be later in the playoffs, might be next season. But when he gets back to that Jayson Tatum level that we know, that's a level where he is just not affected by the defense. He can sidestep. He can drive to the basket. Everything's working for him, right? And that, is something you can't just, do in the gym and practice for sure, right? You can't just chuck up shots and then think it's going to transition over to the game. You need the reps against actual defenders, but the defenders that you're going up against doesn't matter, because if you go up against a bad defender in Washington, for example, it just allows you to get more confidence, which will then only help you when you face those higher caliber opponents like OKC has, right? Which he hasn't faced. He sat out that game, rightfully so. I wouldn't want him going up against Lou Dort either. And we'll see, if he plays when OKC comes to town next week. But as for this game, right, moving on from Jayson Tatum, Jayson Tatum, that's going to be the number one storyline on every game, obviously, because that's, that defines the ceiling for this team this season. But putting that all aside, it's still Jaylen Brown's team. And I've been talking about this over the last couple of videos, whether it be on these game reactions or in the podcast episode, which dropped today on my YouTube channel, as well as Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. You can check that out. We talked about, we did a deep dive into that Suns game, but we just talked about the, crunch time execution from the Celtics and the dynamic between Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum. Who gets to run the offense in those final moments? How does Jaylen Brown work Jayson Tatum back into the sort of rotation in terms of who's getting shots, right? But also, how does Jaylen Brown get his own? And we see it once again in a game like this. Jaylen Brown able to drop, 32 points on 11 of 20 shooting, 1 of 4 from 3, right? He didn't take many threes. It wasn't a game he needed to take that many threes. One of those threes was a end of shot clock in the corner, just throw it up shot. Don't really count that in terms of, his, shooting efficiency, obviously. 9 of 9 at the line, right? He had that fantastic game against the Suns where he went 19 of 21 from the line. And, he's had ups and downs shooting-wise from the line, right? He hasn't been a great free throw shooter in his career. Only around 75, whatever it is. And so, once again, 9 of 9 at the line with the MVP chance going all night for Jaylen Brown, as they have been going all season long, deservedly so. 6 rebounds, 5 assists, right? Just continuing to be a much better playmaker, continuing to rebound, all the things that he's learned from Jayson Tatum and has had to do as he's sort of played Jayson Tatum's role. Now, I say this, I think the roles are going to be totally different going forward, but Jaylen Brown tried to, not play the same style as Jayson Tatum, but that role as the facilitator, as the number one option on the team, and he's done it, almost as perfectly as you could have asked for. We've talked about this before, and this is not going to be an overall, theme on Jaylen Brown, so we're going to move on soon. But, right, Jaylen Brown, whether he is a top 5 MVP candidate, whether he's first team or second team All-NBA, whether Joe Mazzulla's coach of the year, doesn't really matter. Jaylen Brown and the Celtics know that Jayson Tatum is the number 1, the number 2 option, however you want to put it. There are no number 1, number 2 options anymore between Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Jayson Tatum can still be the facilitator, the point forward, if you may, right? He can still be running the offense, but Jaylen Brown is the, at least for this season, is the contact guy, going to go up to the rim, put pressure on the defense, make shots, make contested fadeaway shots, going to be the driving factor in this year's playoffs. And Jayson Tatum can be that floor general and not have to worry about the scoring load. That's how this team is going to succeed in the playoffs. But getting back to this game, it was great to see Kristaps Porzingis come back to the Garden. He seems to be healthy and in a good spot right now. That's great to see. Didn't have a great game. Do believe he only took 13 shots, went 4 of 13, 2 of 7 from 3, 1 of 4, 11 points for him in 23 minutes. I think he is on a minutes restriction. Was a +3 in the game somehow, though. But, right, Kristaps Porzingis, whatever you want to say about his time in Boston, he is an NBA championship. He had just maybe one of the greatest return games of all time, and what he was able to do in Game 1 against Dallas. The 20 points, the block shots, the transitions that he was able to do in that game. By far one of my favorite, best return games of all time. Certainly any ones that I've seen. Right? It's been a struggle since then, obviously. And he was a big problem, or a big reason for the Celtics' lack of success in the playoffs last season. I think his sickness really hurt the Celtics. Was my, probably number one reason why the Celtics lost last season in that, second round against the Knicks, right? But, he went to Atlanta, wasn't playing, when he's on the court, he plays great. He helps the team, any team he's been on, but, right, he hasn't been able to be on the court. That sickness, it wasn't really injuries this season, it was that continued sickness, and now he seems to be, hopefully, they figured out something, a cure, not a cure, but whatever, something to solve his illness. And, assuming Jimmy Butler, Steph Curry, and Kristaps Porzingis can be on the court healthy next season, this season, obviously a wash, but next season with Draymond Green, I do think this team can be a, I don't know about a championship caliber team, but definitely a contender in a heavy loaded Western Conference in Steph's, sort of last hurrah, couple of seasons here, right? But it was nice, his tribute was nice to see, if you were watching the NBC broadcast, that was fun to watch, and obviously I think there are mixed memories for him in Boston, but overall I think you have to deem, or I guess, you'd have to say that his, at least the 2024 run in the championship year was a success, right? And he did miss games for injuries in the regular season, but it felt like they sat him a lot. He came back for rest. It felt like, yes, he did miss a big chunk of time, but he wasn't in and out of the lineup that often. You felt like you made the most of him, given his status. And we'll see what happens with him in a contract in the next couple of years. Hopefully he can get something done with the Warriors or whatever team it may be. As far as the Warriors, obviously not much going for them right now. Steph is out, who knows when he's coming back. Next couple of weeks, hopefully for them, as they try and now, they're in the 10th spot now in the West, I think, or at least tied with the Portland Trailblazers for that last 2 spots in the play-in tournament. They're not going to fall out just because Memphis is tanking below them and is, I think, already 8 games back of them already. Memphis has done one of the best jobs of tanking this season. And we're not going to have a tanking show here. But the fact that you were trying to win early in the season and were well behind the teams, and when I say well behind, you had too many wins compared to the other teams that were trying to tank. And they've just done a brilliant job of losing games and losing games quickly. All right, but back to this game, right? We talked about Jaylen Brown and his performance. We talked about Jayson Tatum. Other players in this game, obviously Derek White, only had 11 points, but continues to just improve that shooting with the, just attention taken off of him from Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And then obviously he is great defensively. He has to be a second team, at least second team, maybe even first team all defensive player player this season. Sorry. Right? Just because of what he was able to do. Right? He had a play in the late fourth quarter where, he's able to get the rebound, or I guess it wasn't a rebound, but the Warriors get a rebound. They go out in transition. Porzingis has it, and Derek White's able to track it down, sprint, and poke it free for a transition bucket the other way for the Celtics. Just a great defensive performance, as he always does each and every night. I don't think he had a block in this game. He had one block in this game, right? But just things that don't show up in the box score. Just brilliant Derek White stuff. Some poor performance from Garza in this game. Keita, he had an up and down night. I thought he had, a nice close to the game. He did foul, get a couple, a few too many fouls early and had to sub out. They put in Garza. Garza was missing a lot of easy buckets around the rim. I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, Garza was a plus 10, 6 of 10, but, some easy bunnies around the rim. He could have went 8 for 10 at least. But overall, a good night for him. 7 rebounds, right? The Celtics continue to get production out of their center rotation. And we'll see when Vucevic comes back. Probably for game 1 of the playoffs is, most expected. Probably for him. We'll see how much he plays. He might play in the earlier rounds. My guess is they won't use him much in those later rounds. Especially because Jayson Tatum hasn't had the chance to really, play with him, get that pick and roll going with him, as he is now, looking pretty good with the Keita and the Garza pick and rolls. But I'm gonna wrap it up here. The Celtics, win 120-99. They improve to 46-23, 23 games, or 23 more wins than losses. Just a fantastic season, and now the expectation for this team is at least the conference finals, if not the championship. So it becomes, I guess it goes from being, this just great story, this great Jaylen Brown leadership, to a team that now has, expectations on them, right? They're no longer playing with the house money now that Jayson Tatum has come back and looked the way he has, right? This team needs to go to the conference finals at the very least for it to be a successful season. But, that is to come down the road. As for right now, we will have another reaction after the Celtics game against the Grizzlies on Friday. I do believe they are away, if I'm not mistaken. I will check right now, but we'll have a reaction to that. Yes, they are away at 8 p.m., so that'll be about 11 p.m. Live stream here on YouTube. You can check out the latest podcast episode, as I had mentioned earlier, whether it be on YouTube or on your favorite podcasting app. We'll continue to have highlights and content throughout the weekend, and then they play the Wolves on Sunday night. We probably will not go live for that game. We'll have a reaction, of course, to the game, but we won't go live for the game. So make sure to check that out on YouTube. And then podcast episodes coming after every 3 games. Reactions coming after every game for the most part, if I'm available, or it's not a midnight end to the game, because I just, don't want to be recording for an hour after the game at that point. Thank you guys so much for watching. Follow on social media, and until next time, go C's.